No one understood the foreign millionaire at dinner, but the street girl understood everything and said, "If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from." Let's begin. The rain lashed against the streets of Miami that June night. The Starfish restaurant, located in the elegant Coral Gables neighborhood, glowed like a jewel in the urban landscape. Inside, the murmur of conversations mingled with the clinking of glasses and cutlery. In one of the more discreet corners, Catherine Hoffman, a Swiss millionaire in her early 40s, sat alone, her restless gaze sweeping across the luxurious setting. Catherine's breathing grew increasingly erratic. Her hands, adorned with expensive jewelry, trembled as she tried to hold the menu. Something seemed to be profoundly wrong. She tried to call the waiter, but her words came out disjointed, partly in Portuguese, partly in English, partly in her native tongue. The young waiter approached, polite but visibly confused. "Are you all right, ma'am? Can I help you with anything?" he asked, leaning slightly. Catherine tried to respond, but her blue eyes, normally firm and confident, now conveyed only panic. Her voice choked, and she shook her head negatively, leaving the waiter even more bewildered. The other customers began to cast curious glances in her direction, some whispering among themselves, others pretending not to notice the embarrassing situation. In a secluded corner, near the kitchen entrance, Louisa observed the scene intently. At only 13 years old, the girl shouldn't have been there. She had sneaked in to escape the storm raging outside after spending the day selling handmade bracelets nearby. The management hadn't noticed her yet, too busy with the intense evening rush. Louisa had brown skin, curly hair tied back in a makeshift ponytail, and deep brown eyes that seemed to see beyond what was visible. She wore a simple t-shirt, faded by time, and denim shorts that had seen better days. Her feet were clad in rubber sandals, wet from the rain. The girl watched the woman in crisis carefully. There was something in Catherine's expression that Louisa recognized. It wasn't just nervousness or a fleeting discomfort. It was fear. A visceral fear she had seen many times in the eyes of people who lived on the streets, like herself. The waiter stepped away, casting worried glances in Catherine's direction as he went to consult the manager. The millionaire now had her head down, one hand at her throat, as if trying to control her breathing. Her shoulders rose and fell in rapid, uneven movements. Without much thought, Louisa moved discreetly between the tables, approaching the struggling woman. She didn't know exactly why she was doing it. Perhaps it was the same intuition that had kept her alive on the streets since her grandmother, Mrs. Zuleika, had gotten very sick 2 years ago, leaving her practically alone in the world. "Do you need help, ma'am?" Louisa asked in a low voice, stopping beside Catherine's table. The woman looked up, surprised by the girl's presence. She tried to speak again, this time in English. "I can't breathe. I think I'm having a panic attack." Fortunately, Louisa understood basic English. She had learned by listening to tourists on the waterfront and watching videos on borrowed cell phones. The public internet in the plaza also helped. On days when she managed to use an old tablet she had received from a social worker. "Try to breathe with me," Louisa said in Portuguese, gesturing for the woman to imitate her. "Slowly, inhale, exhale." To Louisa's surprise, Catherine seemed to understand and tried to follow her instructions. The girl sat discreetly in the empty chair opposite the woman and continued to guide her breathing with slow gestures. "You understand me?" Catherine asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, a little," Louisa replied in hesitant English. "Breathe slow, calm." Gradually, Catherine's breathing normalized. Color slowly returned to her face. Her eyes, previously unfocused by panic, are now fixed on the girl in front of her, with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you, obrigada," Catherine said, alternating between languages. Louisa gave a small smile. "Are you feeling better now?" Catherine nodded, still recovering. She looked at Louisa more closely, noticing her simple clothes and the girl's overall appearance. At that moment, the restaurant manager approached quickly, accompanied by the waiter. "Is everything all right?" "Ma'am?" he asked in a professional tone, then directed a disapproving look at Louisa. "Is this girl bothering you?" Before Louisa could get up and escape, Catherine replied firmly, her Portuguese heavily accented. "No, she is helping me. Please, let her stay." The manager hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with Louisa's presence in his elegant establishment. "As you wish, ma'am. Can I bring you anything to make you feel better?" "Water, please." "For both of us," Catherine replied, her voice gaining strength. When the manager moved away, Louisa shifted uncomfortably in her chair, aware of the other customers' stares. "I shouldn't be here," she said in a low voice. "I only came in because of the rain." Catherine studied Louisa's face for a moment. "How did you know what to do? To help me with the, how do you say, panic attack?" Louisa shrugged. "My grandmother used to have them sometimes. She taught me how to help her." The waiter returned with 2 waters and some bread rolls, placing them on the table with a forced smile. Catherine thanked him and waited for him to leave before continuing the conversation. "What's your name?" she asked, now in more careful Portuguese. "Louisa. Louisa Almeida." Something strange happened when Catherine heard the surname. Her eyes widened for an instant, and she seemed to freeze momentarily, as if that name had touched a deep memory. "Almeida," she repeated, almost in a whisper. Louisa noticed the reaction but didn't understand why. "Yes, Almeida, why?" Catherine quickly composed herself. "Nothing, just... I remembered someone I knew a long time ago." She took a sip of water and changed the subject. "Do you live near here, Louisa?" The girl hesitated, reluctant to reveal details about her life to a stranger. "More or less. I sell bracelets in the plaza during the day." "And your parents?" "I don't have a father, my mother." Louisa paused. "She left when I was little. My grandmother took care of me, but she got sick. Now she's in a state general hospital, and I manage on my own." Catherine listened attentively, her eyes never leaving the girl's face. There was something in her expression, a mixture of compassion and something deeper, more personal, that Louisa couldn't decipher. "Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" Catherine asked. "Yes, I do," Louisa replied quickly, uncomfortable with the question. "There's an old lady, Mrs. Celia, who lets me sleep on her porch when it rains a lot." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. Her demeanor had completely changed since the panic attack. Now she seemed focused, almost calculating. "I'd like to thank you for your help, Louisa." "May I buy you dinner?" Louisa looked around, aware that she didn't belong in that environment. "You don't have to. I just did what anyone would do." "But not everyone would," Catherine insisted. "Please, let me thank you." Something in Catherine's voice, a sincerity Louisa rarely encountered in people, made the girl accept. "Okay, then." During dinner, Louisa noticed that Catherine asked many questions about her life, her mother, her grandmother. The woman seemed genuinely interested, but there were moments when her eyes acquired a strange glint, as if she was confirming something she already suspected. "Your mother, what was she like?" Catherine asked at one point. Louisa fiddled with her fork, pushing a piece of fish around her plate. "I don't remember much about her. She left home when I was about 5. My grandmother said she went to try her luck in New York City, that she'd send for us later. But we never heard from her again." "And your father?" "I never knew him. My grandmother said he was a foreigner, that he met my mother when she worked at a luxury hotel here in Miami." Catherine was silent for a moment, as if digesting the information. "Your mother. What was her name?" "Julia. Julia Almeida." Again, that strange look. Catherine took a sip of water, as if needing time to formulate the next question. "And your grandmother is in which hospital?" "In the State General Hospital. She had a stroke 2 years ago. I used to visit her every day. But now I can only go on weekends because it's far and the bus fare." Catherine gently interrupted. "Aren't you in school, Louisa?" The girl lowered her eyes. "I stopped last year. It got difficult after my grandmother got sick. I even tried to continue, but I needed to work." "Sell the bracelets." She raised her wrist, showing some of the colorful bracelets she made. "I like to study, but—" "What did you like to study?" Catherine asked, her blue eyes attentive to Louisa's expressions. "English and math," Louisa replied with a small smile. "My teacher said I learned quickly." Catherine smiled back. "I can see that. Your English is good for someone who learned on their own." When they finished dinner, The rain outside had subsided. Catherine paid the bill and seemed to hesitate before saying goodbye. "Louisa, I'd like to help you. Can I meet you tomorrow? Perhaps we can talk about getting you back to school." Louisa felt a mixture of hope and distrust. Why would a rich foreign woman be interested in her? It wasn't the first time someone had approached with promises of help, only to disappear later. "Why do you want to help me?" "Ma'am," Catherine seemed surprised by the direct question, "because you helped me when no one else did, and because—" She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "Because I believe in the potential I see in you." It wasn't the whole truth, Louisa could sense. There was something more, something Catherine wasn't saying, but the possibility of help, of perhaps being able to go back to school, of having resources to better care for her grandmother. It was too tempting to refuse. "Okay, we can meet at Freedom Tower Plaza, near the fountain. I sell my bracelets there during the day." Catherine nodded and took a card from her purse, handing it to Louisa. "My phone number. If you need anything before then, you can call." Louisa took the card, observing the name printed in gold letters. Catherine Hoffman, International Art Consultant. "Are you really from Switzerland?" Louisa asked, pronouncing the country's name carefully. "Yes, but I travel a lot for work. I've been in Brazil for a few weeks." When they said goodbye at the restaurant door, Catherine offered Louisa money for a taxi, but the girl refused, saying she preferred to walk, as the rain had lessened. The truth was, Louisa wanted time to think, to process that strange encounter. As she walked through the wet streets, towards Mrs. Celia's house, Louisa couldn't stop thinking about Catherine's reactions to hearing the surname Almeida, and her mother's name, Julia. There was recognition there, she was sure of it. But how could a Swiss millionaire know her mother, a simple hotel maid who had abandoned her family years ago? Arriving at Mrs. Celia's simple house in the Wynwood neighborhood, Louisa found the elderly woman still awake, waiting for her on the porch. "Girl, I was worried. With all this rain—" The old woman, white with grey hair and a kind face, looked at Louisa's clothes. "But you're quite dry, and smelling of good food." Louisa smiled, sitting beside the old woman on the wooden bench on the porch. "Mrs. Celia, can you believe I had dinner at a fancy restaurant today?" "And how did that happen, my child?" the old woman asked, adjusting her glasses on her face. "A foreign woman was having a panic attack there, and I helped her. Then she offered me dinner as thanks." Mrs. Celia looked at Louisa with a mixture of pride and concern. "You have a good heart, child, but you need to be careful with strangers, okay?" "I know, Mrs. Celia, but this woman, she's different. She wants to help me. Said we can meet tomorrow to talk about me going back to school." The old woman frowned. "And does she want something in return?" Louisa thought for a moment. "I don't think so. At least, she didn't ask for anything, but what, my child?" She got strange when I said my mother's name, as if she already knew her, or knew who she was. Mrs. Celia shifted on the bench, her wrinkled face becoming serious. "Louisa, promise me you'll be careful. The world doesn't usually give free gifts. If this foreign woman is interested in you, there might be a reason she's not telling you." Louisa nodded, knowing the old woman was right. "I'll be careful, I promise." That night, lying on the thin mattress Mrs. Celia had prepared for her on the sheltered porch, Louisa watched the raindrops still falling slowly. In her hand, Catherine Hoffman's business card. In her mind, unanswered questions. Who was Catherine Hoffman, really? How could she know Julia Almeida? And why did her expression change so much when she heard her mother's name? As sleep began to claim her, Louisa decided that at the next day's meeting, she would observe Catherine more closely. She would try to find out what the woman really wanted. Because one thing was certain, no one took that much interest in a street girl without a good reason. On the other side of the city, in a luxurious suite at the Setai, Miami Beach, Catherine Hoffman observed the illuminated city from her window. In her hands, an old silver locket with a faded photograph inside. The image showed two young women, smiling at the camera. One of them was Catherine, visibly younger, the other, a Brazilian with dark hair and eyes very similar to Louisa's. Catherine closed the locket with a deep sigh. After so many years of searching, could it be possible that she had finally found what she was looking for? And more importantly, Was she prepared for the consequences that would follow? The rain continued to fall over Miami, washing the streets, but not the memories and secrets that connected seemingly distant lives. Fate had made its move, bringing Louisa and Catherine closer. Now, it was up to them to discover the invisible ties that bound them, no matter how painful the truths might be. The next morning, the sun shone brightly over Miami, as if the previous night's storm had never existed. Louisa woke up early, as usual. She helped Mrs. Celia prepare a simple coffee and went out to Freedom Tower Plaza, carrying her small box of handmade bracelets. The plaza was already bustling when she arrived. Tourists photographed the fountain and the historic buildings around it. Street vendors offered coconut water and souvenirs, and the typical Miami heat was beginning to intensify, promising another scorching day. Louisa set up her small selling point, displaying the colorful bracelets on a piece of black cloth on a park bench. Each one was unique, made with threads, beads, and small shells she collected on the beach. It was a craft she had learned from her grandmother, and which now ensured her survival. As she arranged the pieces, Louisa thought about the previous night's encounter. The image of Catherine Hoffman, with her foreign accent and penetrating gaze, wouldn't leave her mind. There was something familiar about that woman, something Louisa couldn't explain, and that reaction to hearing her mother's name. What could it mean? Around noon, when the heat was at its peak and sales were slowing down, Louisa saw an elegant black car pull up on the other side of the plaza. The door opened and Catherine stepped out, wearing a light-colored outfit that contrasted with the intense blue of the Miami sky. Even from a distance, the Swiss woman drew attention, not only for her mature beauty and natural elegance, but also for something in her posture that radiated confidence and purpose. Catherine walked directly towards her, as if she knew exactly where to find her. When their eyes met, Louisa felt a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. Part of her wanted to believe that this woman could really help her. Another, more cautious part, remembered Mrs. Celia's words about the dangers of trusting strangers too much. "Good morning, Louisa," Catherine greeted with a warm smile. "Your bracelets are very beautiful." "Thank you," Louisa replied. Watching as Catherine examined the displayed pieces, "I make them all myself. I can see you have talent." Catherine picked up a bracelet woven with blue threads and small white shells. "This reminds me of the sea of my childhood." "Did you grow up near the sea, Ma'am?" "Yes, in a small town on the shore of Lake Geneva, in Switzerland. It's not exactly a sea, but for a child, any body of water large enough seems infinite." Catherine paid for the bracelet, putting it on her wrist. "Have you had lunch yet?" Louisa shook her head. "Not yet. May I invite you to lunch with me? There's a quiet restaurant nearby where we can talk better." Louisa hesitated. The restaurant Catherine mentioned was probably another elegant place where she wouldn't normally be welcome. On the other hand, hunger was a daily reality, and the chance of a full meal was tempting. "Can I put my things away first?" she asked, indicating the bracelets. "Of course, I'll wait." While Louisa gathered her merchandise, she discreetly observed Catherine, who was now looking at the plaza with a contemplative expression. What could be going through the mysterious woman's mind? What did she really want? The restaurant Catherine took her to was in fact elegant, but not as intimidating as the Starfish restaurant. It was located in a restored mansion in historic downtown Miami, with tables on the balcony offering a view of Little Havana. The maitre d' received Catherine as if she already knew her, leading them to a secluded table where they could talk privately. "Do you come here often?" Louisa asked, feeling out of place among the other well-dressed customers. "A few times. I discovered this place on my first visit to Miami a few years ago." "Do you always come to the US?" Catherine took a sip of water before answering. "For the past 5 years, I've been coming frequently. My artwork brings me to New York City regularly, and whenever I can, I visit other cities." "Why Miami?" An enigmatic smile appeared on Catherine's lips. "Let's just say this city has a special meaning for me." The waiter came to take their orders. Catherine suggested some typical Miami dishes, explaining each one to Louisa, who rarely had the opportunity to frequent restaurants. When they were alone again, Catherine adopted a more serious expression. "Louisa, yesterday you told me about your situation. about how you stopped studying and how your grandmother is in the hospital. I would very much like to be able to help you." Louisa straightened in her chair, cautious. "Help me how?" "To start, I would like to help you go back to school. I could pay for a private school, where you would receive a quality education." Louisa's eyes widened. "Private school, but that must be very expensive." "Money is not a problem for me," Catherine said simply. "I can also help with your housing situation. It's not safe for a girl your age to live practically on the streets." Louisa felt her face flush. "I don't live on the streets. Mrs. Celia takes care of me." "I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you, but understand, you deserve more stability, a place that is truly yours." The food arrived, momentarily interrupting the conversation. Louisa observed the colorful and aromatic dishes, feeling her stomach rumble. Despite her hunger, Catherine's proposal made her uncomfortable. It was too generous, inexplicable. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, looking at Catherine. "You don't even know me well." Catherine met her gaze. "There are several reasons, Louisa. First, as I said, you helped me when I was vulnerable, but there's more." She paused, as if weighing her words. "I never had children. My life was dedicated to work, to travel. Now that I am in a more stable phase, I would like to do something meaningful, to help someone who truly deserves a chance." It wasn't the whole truth, Louisa could sense. There was something in Catherine's eyes, a subtle hesitation that betrayed her words. "Is that all it is?" A slight smile appeared on Catherine's lips. "You are very perceptive for your age." "No, that's not all. The truth is," she took a deep breath, "I knew your mother, Louisa." The shock of the revelation made Louisa freeze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "You knew my mother? How, when?" "It was many years ago. I was in Brazil for work, visiting some artists in Miami. Julia worked at the hotel where I was staying. We became friends." Louisa absorbed the information slowly. That's why Catherine had reacted that way when she heard Julia's name, but something still didn't fit. "If you were her friend, why have we never seen you before? Why are you only appearing now?" "We lost contact when I went back to Switzerland. At the time, the internet wasn't what it is today, and Julia didn't have her own phone. I tried to find her on my subsequent visits to Brazil, but she no longer worked at the hotel, and no one knew where she had gone." Catherine took a sip of water, as if needing time to organize her thoughts. "When you said your name yesterday, and mentioned your mother, I realized it could be the same person. The resemblance between you two is remarkable." Louisa tried to process what she was hearing. If Catherine really knew her mother, maybe she knew more about her, about why she had abandoned the family. "And do you know where my mother is now?" A flicker of something, guilt, sadness, passed through Catherine's eyes. "No, unfortunately I don't know. As I said, we lost contact many years ago." Louisa lowered her eyes to her plate. The food, once so appetizing, now seemed less important in the face of the revelations. "My grandmother always said she went to New York City to try her luck. That she'd send for us later." "Julia spoke a lot about New York City," Catherine confirmed. "She dreamed of working in fashion there. Do you think she's still there?" "It's possible," Catherine hesitated before continuing. "Louisa, I know this must all be very confusing for you. Appearing like this after so many years, offering help. I understand your distrust. But I want you to know that my intentions are good. Seeing you yesterday, helping a stranger without expecting anything in return, reminded me of the kindness your mother always showed. I would like to be able to reciprocate in some way." Louisa watched Catherine intently. There was sincerity in her words, but also something more, something unsaid. "If I accept your help," Louisa said slowly, "will you help me find my mother?" The question caught Catherine by surprise. She placed her fork on her plate, her eyes fixed on some distant point. I can try. I have resources, contacts. I can't promise we'll succeed, but I can promise I'll do my best." It was enough, for now. Louisa nodded, returning to her meal. The silence between them was heavy with unasked questions, with partially revealed truths. After lunch, Catherine invited Louisa for a walk through historic downtown Miami. It was strange to see the city through the eyes of a foreigner. Places Louisa considered common gained new dimension through Catherine's enthusiastic comments about the colonial architecture and the rich history behind each building. Passing by an art supply store, Catherine paused at the window. "Do you like to draw, Louisa?" "I used to, in school. The art teacher said I had a knack for it. Let's go in. I want to show you something." Inside the store, Catherine explained different painting techniques, how to assess the quality of brushes and paints. Her knowledge was impressive, and for the first time, Louisa could glimpse the international art consultant mentioned on the business card. They left the store with a bag full of materials, sketchbooks, colored pencils, watercolors. Catherine insisted they were no obligation gifts, just an incentive for Louisa to explore her talent. As the afternoon wore on, Louisa felt her resistance diminish. There was something genuinely captivating about Catherine, her passion for art, her knowledge of the world, her attention to detail. It wasn't hard to imagine how her mother could have become friends with such a sophisticated woman. Sitting at a cafe in Freedom Tower Plaza, Catherine finally presented her concrete proposal. "Louisa, how about we start with private lessons? It would be a way for you to catch up on lost school content before formally entering a school. I know good teachers who could come to you." The girl stirred the acai pulp that Catherine had ordered for her. "And where would I stay?" "At Mrs. Celia's house." "I thought of something better. I rented an apartment near the waterfront with 2 bedrooms. It's small but comfortable. You could stay in the 2nd bedroom. You would have your own space. Your study materials. It would also be easier for the teachers to visit you." Louisa frowned. "You want me to live with you, Mom?" "Only while I'm in Miami. I travel a lot for work, but when I'm away, I could hire someone to stay with you. A housekeeper, perhaps." The proposal was tempting but frightening at the same time. Living with a stranger, however kind she seemed, was a big step. "And my grandmother?" "I can't abandon her." Catherine's eyes softened. "Of course not. We could visit her together, perhaps even get her better treatment in a private hospital." Louisa felt a lump in her throat. The possibility of better care for her grandmother was something she had always wished for but could never offer. "You would really do that?" "Yes, Louisa. As I said, I want to help both of you." At the end of the afternoon, when Catherine dropped her off at Mrs. Celia's house, Louisa was confused. Her head spun with so many possibilities, so many promises. Catherine had asked her to think about the proposal calmly, with no rush to decide. They had agreed to meet again in 2 days. Mrs. Celia immediately noticed that something had changed. She looked curiously at the shopping bags and Louisa's thoughtful expression. "So, child, how was the meeting with that foreigner?" Sitting in the small kitchen, while Mrs. Celia prepared coffee, Louisa told her everything: the lunch, the gifts, the housing and study proposal, the possibility of better treatment for her grandmother. Finally, the revelation that Catherine had known her mother. "And do you believe her?" Mrs. Celia asked, frowning her wrinkled brow. "I don't know. She knew things about my mother, about how she dreamed of New York City, of fashion." "That's not hard to invent, my child," Louisa sighed. "Do I know? But why would she invent a story like that? Why go to the trouble of helping me?" Mrs. Celia sat at the table, her calloused hands wrapped around the coffee cup. "Some people do charity out of genuine kindness, Louisa. But there are also those who have other motives. This woman might be feeling lonely. She might be seeking some kind of redemption, or—" She hesitated. "For she might have ulterior motives that we don't know about. Do you think she wants to harm me?" "Not necessarily. But before you agree to live with her, we need to know more. You said she knew your mother, that they were friends. But what else was between them? Why is she so interested in you now, and why did she never look for your mother before, if they were so close?" Mrs. Celia's questions echoed the doubts already forming in Louisa's mind. Despite Catherine's kindness, there was something in her story that didn't quite fit. "What should I do then?" Mrs. Celia thought for a moment. "Accept the lessons, the materials, see if she really will help your grandmother as she promised. But don't move into her apartment, at least not yet. Say you prefer to stay here with me for now, until you get to know her better. It seemed like a sensible plan. Louisa nodded, feeling a little more secure with the guidance of the old woman who had become a kind of second grandmother to her. "And Louisa," Mrs. Celia added, gently holding the girl's chin, forcing her to look into her eyes. "Pay close attention to everything. To the details, to the stories she tells, to the questions she asks. Sometimes people reveal more than they intend when they think no one is watching." That night, before going to sleep, Louisa opened one of the sketchbooks Catherine had bought. With the new colored pencils, she began to draw her mother's face based on the few faded photos she kept with her. It was a young face, with large eyes and an easy smile. Beside it, hesitantly, she began to sketch Catherine's face. Were there similarities between them? Not in features. Catherine was European, with more angular traits, while her mother had the round face typical of many Brazilians. But there was something in their gazes, an intensity that seemed to connect them through the paper. What had really happened between her mother and Catherine? What wasn't the Swiss woman telling? The next morning, Louisa made a decision. She would not immediately accept the offer to live with Catherine, but she would allow her to help with lessons and her grandmother's treatment. Meanwhile, she would observe, investigate, try to unravel the mystery behind the foreigner's sudden interest. Because one thing was certain, behind the polite smiles and generous promises, Catherine Hoffmann hid secrets, and Louisa was determined to uncover them, even if it meant risking the help she so desperately needed. The days that followed brought rapid changes to Louisa's life. Catherine, true to her word, hired a private tutor who began visiting Louisa at Mrs. Celia's house 3 times a week. Anna Lucia, a young pedagogy graduate, had a dynamic teaching method that quickly won Louisa over. Math, Portuguese, and English lessons became the highlight of her days. Catherine also kept her promise about Louisa's grandmother. One rainy afternoon, she took Louisa to the State General Hospital to visit her, and after conversations with the doctors, initiated the process to transfer her to a private rehabilitation clinic. "Mrs. Zuleika will be able to receive daily physical therapy there," Catherine explained, as they returned from the hospital. "The doctors are optimistic about her partial recovery of mobility." Louisa felt tears in her eyes. Seeing her grandmother receive the care she deserved was something she never imagined possible. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Catherine merely squeezed her hand in response, her eyes also moist. As the weeks passed, Louisa continued her silent investigation. She observed Catherine's every reaction when they spoke about her mother, every hesitation, every averted gaze. The Swiss woman seemed genuinely interested in helping, but there were moments when she became distant, lost in thoughts she didn't share. One afternoon, while Catherine was on a work call on the balcony, Louisa noticed a folder of documents on the living room table. Curiosity was stronger than respect for privacy. Quickly, she opened the folder and began to leaf through the papers. Most were documents in German or French, incomprehensible to her. But among them, she found something that made her heart pound. An old photograph, partially hidden in an envelope. It showed 2 young women smiling at the camera. One of them was clearly Catherine, younger, with longer hair. The other. "What are you doing?" Louisa startled. Catherine was standing at the door, her cell phone still in hand, her face a mask of shock and something more, fear. "I'm sorry, I... Louisa stammered, knowing she had been caught red-handed. "I saw the photo and..." Catherine approached quickly, taking the photograph from Louisa's hands. For a moment, her normally composed face showed a mixture of emotions, anger, sadness, anguish. "You shouldn't go through my things," she said, her voice tense, putting the photo back in the envelope. "Case that woman in the photo is my mother, isn't she?" Louisa asked, ignoring the reprimand. Catherine stared at her for a long moment before answering. "Yes, it's Julia. You looked very close." "We were." Catherine put the envelope back in the folder, closing it firmly. "As I said before, we became friends during my stay in Miami." "Just friends?" The direct question made Catherine raise her eyebrows. "What do you mean by that?" "I don't know, it's just that..." Louisa hesitated, organizing her thoughts. You appear out of nowhere, say you knew my mother years ago, offer all this help. There's something more you're not telling me." A heavy silence fell between them. Catherine sat on the sofa, looking suddenly tired. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, more vulnerable than Louisa had ever heard. "You're right, Louisa. There's more to the story, but I don't know if you're ready to hear everything yet." "I'm ready," Louisa insisted, sitting beside her. "I need to know the truth." Catherine looked at Louisa for a long moment, as if assessing how much the girl could bear. Outside, the Miami sky began to darken, announcing a storm. The distant sound of thunder created an even more tense atmosphere in Mrs. Celia's small living room. "Your mother and I weren't just friends," Catherine finally began, choosing her words carefully. "Julia and I had a deeper relationship." "Were you girlfriends?" Louisa asked directly, with no judgment in her voice. A slight smile crossed Catherine's lips. "Not exactly, it was complicated. I was in Brazil for work, supposed to stay only a few weeks. Julia worked at the hotel, as I told you. We started talking because she was studying English and wanted to practice. I found her fascinating, her intelligence, her creativity, the way she spoke about her dreams." Catherine paused, her eyes lost in distant memories. "We started meeting after her shift. I took her to restaurants, art exhibitions, places she had never frequented. In return, she showed me the real Miami, beyond the tourist routes. It was an intense, magical period." "How long did it last?" Louisa asked, absorbing every word, trying to visualize her mother in that story. "Almost 3 months. I extended my stay as long as I could, inventing professional reasons to stay. But eventually, I had to go back to Switzerland." Catherine sighed deeply. "I promised Julia I would return, that we would find a way to be together. We exchanged letters for a few months. And then, the letters stopped coming. I tried to contact the hotel, but they informed me that Julia had resigned. No one knew where she had gone. I returned to Miami almost a year later, looked for her, but it was as if she had disappeared." A stronger thunderclap rattled the windows. The rain began to fall, first in sparse drops, then in dense sheets that blurred the view of the street. "Did you love my mother?" The question came out almost as a whisper. Catherine's eyes closed for a moment, as if the question touched an old wound. "Yes, Louisa, I loved her, in a way I've never loved anyone before or since." Louisa absorbed the information slowly, trying to reconcile this new version of her mother with the few memories she had of her. "How long ago did this happen?" 14 years, almost 15. Louisa's heart raced. The math was simple. "That was shortly before I was born." Catherine nodded, her eyes now fixed on Louisa's. "Yes. Did you know my mother was pregnant when she disappeared?" "No. I only found out recently through—" Catherine hesitated. "Through someone who knew your mother later. That's why I intensified my search for her in recent years." Louisa stood up, suddenly restless. She walked to the window, watching the rain that was now falling heavily. Her mind buzzed with questions, connections, possibilities. Who is my father? Then, the question hung in the air like something alive, pulsating. Catherine shifted on the sofa, clearly uncomfortable. "From what I learned, Julia had a brief relationship with a German tourist after we separated. She never revealed his identity, at least not to the people I spoke with. It wasn't the whole truth. Louisa could feel it. There was something more, something Catherine was still hiding. But before she could press, the front door opened, and Mrs. Celia entered, shaking a drenched umbrella. "My goodness, what a storm!" the old woman exclaimed, then noticed the heavy atmosphere in the room. "Did I interrupt something?" "No, Mrs. Celia," Louisa replied quickly. "We were just talking." Catherine stood up, composing herself. "I need to go. I have a video conference in an hour. Louisa, can we continue this conversation another day?" "Of course," Louisa replied, although a part of her wanted immediate answers to the dozens of questions now swirling in her mind. When Catherine left, braving the rain to the car waiting for her, Mrs. Celia looked questioningly at Louisa. "What happened here, child? You two looked like you'd seen a ghost." Louisa told Mrs. Celia about the conversation, about the relationship between her mother and Catherine, about the dates that coincided with her birth. As she spoke, she watched the old woman's expressions, seeking some confirmation of her own suspicions. "Do you think she could be—" Mrs. Celia left the question incomplete, but Louisa understood. "I don't know. Biologically, it would be impossible, wouldn't it? But there's something more to this story, something she's not telling me." Mrs. Celia sighed, sitting heavily in the worn armchair that occupied the corner of the room. "Louisa, in this life I've learned one thing. People are rarely entirely good or entirely bad. They are complicated, full of dark corners and secrets. This Catherine, she may be genuinely wanting to help you, but she may also have other motives. How do I know who to trust?" The old woman smiled gently. "Trust your instincts, my child. They rarely deceive you. And remember, even if Catherine has secrets, it doesn't necessarily mean she wants to harm you." That night, Louisa had trouble sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photograph of her mother with Catherine, their complicit smiles, their evident closeness. Unanswered questions spun in her mind. Why had her mother disappeared? Why had she never mentioned Catherine? And, most importantly, why had she abandoned Louisa and her grandmother? In the morning, she made a decision. If Catherine wouldn't tell the whole truth, she would discover it herself. But for that, she would need help. Her plan began to form when she remembered Matthew, a 16-year-old boy who frequented the public library where Louisa sometimes went to use the computers. Matthew was known for his computer skills and for finding information others couldn't. That same afternoon, after her lesson with Anna Lucia, Louisa went to the library. As expected, Matthew was there, hunched over an old laptop, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Hi, Matthew," Louisa greeted, sitting beside him. The boy looked up, a smile forming on his pimple-marked face. "Hey, Louisa. Long time no see." "I've been studying at home. I got a private tutor." Matthew's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Seriously, how did you manage that?" Louisa hesitated before answering. "It's a complicated story. Actually, that's why I came to see you. I need your help." In the following minutes, Louisa told a condensed version of recent events: the encounter with Catherine, the help offered, the revelation about her relationship with her mother, the unanswered questions. "And what exactly do you want me to do?" Matthew asked, intrigued by the story. "I want you to find out everything you can about Catherine Hoffman, who she really is, what her job is. If the story she told me is true," Matthew scratched his chin, thoughtful, "I can try. Do you have any information that might help me? Address, date of birth, places she worked." "I know she's staying at the Cité, Miami Beach. She's an international art consultant. Said she's from Switzerland, from a town near Lake Geneva. She must be in her early 40s, and she's been in Brazil for a few weeks." Louisa pulled Catherine's business card from her bag. "Here. This might help." Matthew examined the card, typing the name and email into the computer. "I'll see what I can find. But Louisa, have you considered that maybe she really does want to help you? From what you told me, she's kept her promises so far." "I know, but I need to be sure. I need to know the whole truth before accepting more of her help." The boy nodded, understanding. "Come back in 2 days. I'll try to have something for you by then." As she walked back to Mrs. Celia's house, Louisa felt both relieved and guilty. She was going behind Catherine's back, secretly investigating her, even after all the help the Swiss woman had offered. But the need to know the complete truth was greater than any feeling of loyalty. The next morning, Louisa received a message from Catherine. "I have news about your grandmother's treatment. Can we meet this afternoon?" They met at an unpretentious coffee shop near the beach, with wooden tables and a sea view. Catherine seemed more relaxed than the day before, wearing casual clothes, light linen pants and a blue cotton blouse that made her seem less foreign, less distant. "I spoke with the specialist doctor this morning," she said after they had placed their orders. "He believes your grandmother is a good candidate for an experimental rehabilitation treatment. It's a new program, combining intensive physical therapy with neuromuscular stimulation." Louisa felt a wave of hope. And that could help her recover more. Yes, according to the doctor, there's a chance of significant recovery of speech and partial mobility on her right side. It wouldn't be a total recovery, but it would greatly improve her quality of life. How much does a treatment like that cost? Catherine waved her hand dismissively. Don't worry about that. I've already arranged everything. Louisa felt the familiar discomfort, gratitude mixed with suspicion. Why are you doing all this for us, ma'am? Catherine looked at her, her blue eyes incredibly serious. Because it's the right thing to do, Louisa. Because your mother was important to me. And because you deserve a better chance in life. Is it just because of my mother? A sigh escaped Catherine's lips. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth, Louisa replied simply. All of it. The Swiss woman looked at the sea for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more contained. There are things I still can't tell you, Louisa. Not because I don't want to, but because I'm still trying to understand everything. To put all the pieces together. I promise that when I have the complete picture, I will share it with you. It wasn't the answer Louisa expected, but there was something in Catherine's sincerity that made her accept, at least for now. All right, but don't take too long. I hate being kept in the dark. Catherine smiled slightly. You're very much like her, you know. Determined, direct. Julia also hated half-truths. It was strange to hear someone talk about her mother that way, not as a distant figure who had abandoned the family, but as a real person with characteristics and preferences. For the first time, Louisa felt she was truly getting to know Julia through Catherine's eyes. What was she like when you met? Catherine's face lit up with memory. Vibrant, full of life, she had a way of looking at the world with so much wonder. Despite all the difficulties, and she had many, she maintained this contagious optimism. She believed that life could always get better, that dreams were meant to be pursued. What dreams did she have? She wanted to be a fashion designer. She drew clothes in her free time. She had a natural talent. She showed me some drawings. They were really good. I encouraged her to try a fashion school, but she didn't have the resources. Catherine paused, a crease forming between her eyebrows. When we parted, I promised I would help her. I had contacts in the fashion world. I could open doors for her. But then she disappeared. Louisa absorbed the information in silence, trying to reconcile this version of her mother with the woman who had abandoned a small daughter and an elderly mother. Why did she never talk about you to my grandmother? To anyone? Catherine hesitated. Our relationship wasn't conventional. At the time, Julia was concerned about what people would think. Miami, despite all its diversity, could still be a conservative place in many aspects. And then, why did she never come back? Why did she never send news? The pain was there in Louisa's voice, the wound never fully closed from the abandonment. I don't know, Louisa. It's one of the things I'd also like to understand. Catherine extended her hand, covering Louisa's in a gesture of comfort. But I know that, whatever the reason, it wasn't because she didn't love you. In the few months we were together, Julia always spoke with such affection about family, about wanting to have children one day. I can't imagine she would leave you without a very strong reason. Catherine's words brought a strange comfort, but they didn't fill the void Louisa had carried for as long as she could remember. There were still so many unanswered questions. 2 days later, as arranged, Louisa met Matthew at the library. The boy seemed anxious, his eyes gleaming with excitement behind his thick-rimmed glasses. I found some interesting things, he said, as soon as Louisa sat beside him. Your Swiss woman is indeed an art consultant, and a good one. She has articles published in specialized magazines, gives lectures at universities. I found records of exhibitions she organized in several European cities. So that part is true, Louisa murmured, feeling a pang of relief. Yes, but there's more. In the last 5 years, she's been coming regularly to the US. I managed to find entry records into the country. It's public information, sometimes for work, participating in art events in New York City and Los Angeles, but other times for no apparent professional reason. She mentioned she was looking for my mother. Matthew nodded. Could be, but there's another curious thing. He turned the laptop screen so Louisa could see. I found this article in a Swiss newspaper from 3 years ago. The article was in German, but there was a photo of Catherine next to an older man, both in formal attire. What does it say? Louisa asked, frustrated at not understanding the text. It's about the death of her husband, Hans Hoffmann, an important banker in Switzerland. Apparently, he left his entire fortune to Catherine, which caused some controversy in his family. Louisa frowned. She never mentioned a husband. From what I understood from the text, I used an online translator, they had been separated for years, but never officially divorced. The information was surprising. Why had Catherine never mentioned a marriage, even when she spoke openly about her relationship with Julia? "There's one more thing," Matthew continued, opening another file on the computer. "I found this photo on a social media network, on a profile of an art gallery in New York City. The photo showed Catherine at a vernissage, talking to a middle-aged Brazilian woman. There was nothing special about the image, except, look at the background in the left corner," Matthew indicated. Louisa squinted at the screen. Partially visible, talking to someone else, was a woman who made her heart stop for an instant. Her hair was different, shorter and in a modern cut. But the face, even in profile, even with the image not so clear, Louisa would recognize that face anywhere. "It's her," Louisa whispered, her voice trembling. "It's my mother." Matthew looked at Louisa with concern. "Are you sure?" "The image isn't very clear. I'm absolutely sure." Louisa felt her heart beating erratically. "When was this photo taken?" "A year and a half ago, at a gallery in Soho, New York City. An exhibition by a contemporary artist, from what I understood in the caption." Louisa tried to process the information. A year and a half ago, her mother was alive in New York City, frequenting an art environment and, apparently, in the same space as Catherine. "She lied to me," Louisa said, her voice choked with a mixture of anger and pain. "She said she didn't know where my mother was, that she had lost contact with her." "Maybe it's not what it seems," Matthew suggested, trying to calm his friend. "The photo doesn't show them interacting. Maybe Catherine didn't even see your mother there." "No, that doesn't make sense. Catherine said she intensified her search for my mother in recent years. If she was so determined to find her, how would she not notice her at a small event like that?" Louisa stood up abruptly, her chair almost falling with the sudden movement. "I have to go. I need to confront Catherine with this." Matthew grabbed her arm. "Wait, Louisa. Think carefully before you do that. If she's hiding things from you, confronting her directly might not be the best strategy. Maybe it's better to keep observing, gathering more information." The wisdom of the advice cut through the fog of emotions that dominated Louisa. Matthew was right. If she confronted Catherine immediately, she might lose the chance to discover the whole truth. "What do you suggest, then?" The boy thought for a moment. "Keep accepting her help. Observe her closely. Try to find more clues, more connections. And most importantly, try to find out if your mother is still in New York City. Where exactly she might be." Louisa took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "You're right. I'll do that. Can you help me get more information?" "Of course. I'll keep looking." "And Louisa," Matthew hesitated, "be careful. I'm not saying Catherine is dangerous, but she's clearly hiding things. Be smart." In the days that followed, Louisa adopted a new strategy. She became more receptive to Catherine's proposals, agreed to visit the apartment the Swiss woman had rented, and even agreed to spend some afternoons there, under the pretext of having a quieter environment to study. The apartment, as Catherine had described, was small but comfortable, with a privileged view of the sea. It had 2 bedrooms, Catherine's and another she had prepared for Louisa, with a new desk, a comfortable bed, and shelves full of carefully selected books. During these visits, Louisa discreetly searched for clues, for anything that could reveal more about the true nature of the relationship between Catherine and her mother, or about Julia's current whereabouts. But Catherine was cautious, keeping personal documents locked away and avoiding leaving sensitive information in plain sight. One afternoon, while Catherine was showering, Louisa managed to briefly access the Swiss woman's cell phone, which had been left unlocked on the living room table. Quickly, she checked recent calls and messages, but found nothing significant. Most conversations were in German or French, languages Louisa didn't master. However, one thing caught her attention, a contact saved simply as J.E. There were several messages exchanged with this contact, all in English. Louisa quickly read some of them, her heart racing with adrenaline and the fear of being discovered. Still no concrete progress. Read a message sent by Catherine 3 weeks earlier. But I believe we are close. The resemblance is undeniable. Be careful, replied the mysterious J. Don't create excessive expectations, and remember the agreement. What agreement? Who was J? Could it be that... The sound of the shower ceased, and Louisa quickly returned the phone to the table, in the same position it was before. When Catherine emerged from the bathroom minutes later, she found Louisa apparently engrossed in reading a history book. Would you like some tea? Catherine offered, without suspecting anything. I'd love some, Louisa replied with a forced smile. During tea, Louisa tried a more direct approach. Catherine, you said you were looking for my mother for years. Did you ever come close to finding her? The Swiss woman seemed momentarily surprised by the question, but quickly recovered. There were times when I thought I had promising leads. Once, about 2 years ago, I heard that someone with her name worked in a boutique in New York City. I went there, but it was another Julia. A lie. Louisa was almost certain of it now, especially after seeing the photo in the art gallery, but she kept her expression neutral, pretending to believe. That must have been disappointing. It was, but I didn't give up, and, in a way, finding you is like finding a part of her. The words were sweet, almost sincere. Louisa felt divided. A part of her wanted to believe in the affection Catherine showed, while another part constantly remembered the lies, the half-truths, the secrets. That night, back at Mrs. Celia's house, Louisa shared her discoveries with the old woman, the messages on the phone, the photo in the art gallery, the inconsistencies in Catherine's stories. What do you think she really wants, Mrs. Celia? The old woman reflected for a moment, her wrinkled hands busy with crochet. It could be many things, my child. Maybe she's trying to find your mother through you. Maybe she wants to compensate for something in the past. Or maybe... Mrs. Celia hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe you are more important to her than she is revealing. Think about it, Louisa. She appears just now, offers so much help, asks so many questions about you and your story. Do you think there might be some direct connection between us? Besides my mother? Mrs. Celia shrugged. In today's world, family can mean many things, and secrets from the past have a habit of returning when we least expect them. The old woman's words stayed with Louisa throughout the night. There was a possibility she hadn't fully considered, something so improbable and yet so obvious that it made her heart ache just thinking about it. The next day, she decided to take a bolder step in her investigation. Taking advantage of Catherine needing to go out to resolve issues related to her grandmother's transfer to the private clinic, Louisa searched the Swiss woman's room more thoroughly. Under a pile of documents in the desk drawer, she found a brown envelope. Inside, there were more old photos, Catherine and Julia at different times, clearly happy together. But there was also something else, a medical document in German, with Catherine's name. Louisa couldn't understand the content, but she recognized some medical terms that seemed related to fertility. At the bottom of the envelope, she found a business card for a clinic in New York City, specializing in assisted reproduction. On the back, handwritten, a name and a phone number, Dr. Miranda Cavalcanti, specialist in complex cases. Louisa put the card in her pocket and returned the rest of the contents to the envelope, placing it exactly where she had found it. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fit together, forming an image that was both disturbing and fascinating. She needed to talk to this Dr. Miranda, find out the connection to Catherine. And, more importantly, she needed to find a way to get to New York City, where she suspected her mother still lived, because now she was almost certain the mysterious contact J on Catherine's phone was Julia. Her mother was alive, in contact with Catherine, and for some reason, both were keeping Louisa in the dark about the whole truth. But why? What could be so terrible as to justify so many lies, so much secrecy? As she left the apartment, Louisa felt a renewed determination. She would discover the truth, no matter how painful it was, because living with doubts and half-truths was worse than facing any reality, however difficult it might be. The next morning, Louisa called the number on the business card, pretending to be Catherine's assistant. The receptionist informed her that Dr. Miranda was at an international conference and would only return next week. a temporary obstacle, but Louisa was determined not to give up. Meanwhile, her grandmother was transferred to the specialized clinic, as promised by Catherine. Louisa visited her in the new, comfortable and spacious room, so different from the cramped ward of the public hospital. Mrs. Zuleika, even with the limitations caused by the stroke, seemed more alert, her eyes more lively. The doctors were optimistic about her partial recovery. "She's in good hands here," the neurologist told Louisa. "The rehabilitation program Mrs. Hoffman chose is one of the most advanced in the country." Seeing her grandmother receive the treatment she deserved, Louisa again felt the internal conflict that had tormented her from the beginning. Catherine had kept all her promises so far. She was truly helping, making a difference in their lives. Was it fair to distrust her intentions so much? But the lies were still there, undeniable. The photo in the art gallery, the mysterious messages, the hidden documents. There was a greater truth that Catherine was hiding, and Louisa was determined to discover it. After an intense week of lessons, visits to her grandmother at the clinic, and strategic meetings with Catherine, Louisa finally had an opportunity she couldn't waste. The Swiss woman would need to travel to New York City for 3 days to resolve professional matters, an art exhibition she was organizing. "Will you be all right alone?" Catherine asked, packing her suitcase in the apartment. "I can ask Anna Lucia to stay longer with you, or perhaps you'd prefer to spend these days at Mrs. Celia's house." "I'll be fine," Louisa assured her. "I can split my time between here and Mrs. Celia's house, and I'll visit my grandmother every day, as always." Catherine smiled, seemingly pleased with the maturity Louisa was demonstrating. In recent weeks, the girl had shown herself to be more receptive to her help, more open to the possibility of eventually moving into the apartment, of accepting the education and opportunities offered. "I have something for you," Catherine said, handing Louisa a new cell phone. "So we can stay in touch while I'm away. My number is already saved in the contacts." Louisa accepted the gift with a mix of gratitude and guilt. Each new gesture of generosity made it harder to maintain her distrust, to keep her determination to uncover Catherine's secrets. After Catherine's departure, Louisa wasted no time. The plan she had devised with Matthew was bold, perhaps even reckless, but it was her best chance to discover the truth. The next day, after visiting her grandmother at the clinic, Louisa went straight to the bus terminal, where Matthew was waiting for her with 2 bus tickets to New York City. "Are you sure about this?" the boy asked, handing her the ticket. "Traveling alone to New York City is dangerous, Louisa." "I won't be alone, you're with me," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she actually felt. "Besides, we've researched everything. We know where the gallery is. We know where Dr. Miranda's clinic is. We have enough money for taxis and food. And we'll be back tomorrow night, before Catherine returns." Matthew didn't seem entirely convinced, but he had committed to helping. After all, he was the one who had found the crucial information that led to this moment. The bus journey lasted almost 24 hours. Louisa spent much of the time looking out the window, watching the landscape change as they moved away from the Miami coast and traveled through the country's interior. In her mind, she rehearsed what she would say when, if, she found her mother. Would there be anger? Forgiveness? What would it be like to look into the eyes of the woman who had abandoned her so many years ago? New York City greeted them with a fine drizzle and a gray sky, so different from the relentless sun of Miami. The gigantic city, with its skyscrapers and endless avenues, seemed to swallow the 2 teenagers who timidly emerged from the bus terminal. "Where do we go first?" Matthew asked, consulting the map on his phone. "To the gallery," Louisa decided. "So maybe someone there knows my mother, knows where to find her." The gallery was in Soho, an upscale neighborhood full of alternative cultural spaces. The taxi dropped them off in front of a modern building with large glass windows that revealed a spacious, well-lit interior. "How are we going to do this?" Matthew whispered, as they watched the gallery from across the street. "We can't just walk in and ask for your mother." Louisa thought for a moment. "I will pretend we're students doing a project on contemporary art. You take photos, I ask the questions. At some point, I'll mention last year's exhibition and show the photo you found." The plan worked surprisingly well. The young woman who greeted them at the gallery, an assistant named Deborah, was happy to talk about the artists represented and past exhibitions. When Louisa showed the photo on her phone, casually asking about the people in it, the assistant immediately recognized them. "Oh, that's Paul Mendes' vernissage last year. It was a big success. Catherine Hoffman was here, of course. She's an important client, always buys pieces for European collectors." "And this woman here in the corner?" Louisa asked, pointing to her mother, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Who is she?" Deborah leaned in to get a better look. "Oh, that's Julia. She doesn't work here anymore. But she was our assistant curator at the time. Very talented." Louisa's heart pounded. It was the confirmation she needed. Her mother had worked there, at the gallery, probably in regular contact with Catherine. "She doesn't work here anymore. Where did she go?" Deborah hesitated, looking at Louisa more closely. "Do you know her?" "Not personally," Matthew quickly interjected. "We read about her in an article about emerging curators. We wanted to include her in our project." The assistant seemed to accept the explanation. "Julia left about 6 months ago to focus on a personal project. I think she's working in fashion now. It was always her passion." "Do you know where we can find her?" Louisa asked, unable to completely hide her anxiety. "There's an atelier in the garment district, if I'm not mistaken. Julia Almeida Creations, or something like that. You should be able to find the address online." Louisa exchanged a meaningful look with Matthew. It was more than they expected to discover so quickly. They thanked the assistant and left the gallery, Louisa's heart beating so fast it felt like it would burst from her chest. Outside, Matthew was already looking up the atelier on his phone. Found it. Julia Almeida Fashion Atelier. "It's about 20 minutes from here by taxi." "Let's go," Louisa said, determined. The atelier was located in a renovated old industrial warehouse on a quiet street in the garment district. The discreet facade displayed only a simple sign with the name Almeida in modern letters. Through the large windows, mannequins, colorful fabrics, and some people working inside could be seen. Standing in front of the place, Louisa felt her legs weaken. After so many years imagining this moment, she was just a few steps away from finally reuniting with her mother. "Do you want me to go in with you?" Matthew asked, noticing her nervousness. Louisa took a deep breath. "No, I need to do this alone. Wait here, please." With hesitant steps, Louisa crossed the street and entered the atelier. A small bell on the door announced her arrival, causing a young assistant to approach with a professional smile. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" I'm looking for Julia Almeida. Do you have an appointment?" "Julia is very busy today with the new collection." "No, I don't, but it's important. Can you tell her that—" Louisa hesitated. "Can you tell her it's Louisa from Miami?" The assistant looked at her curiously, but nodded. "One moment, please." While waiting, Louisa observed the space around her. It was evident that her mother had finally realized her dream of working in fashion. Elegant dresses in different stages of production were scattered around the atelier, along with drawings and fabric samples. On one wall, several magazine clippings showed models wearing Julia Almeida Creations. "Louisa." The voice came from behind her, making her freeze. Slowly, Louisa turned around, and there she was, older than in the photos she kept, her hair shorter and with some grey streaks, but unmistakably her mother, Julia Almeida, in flesh and blood. Looking at her with an expression of absolute shock. "Mom," was all Louisa could say, her voice almost a whisper. For a terrible moment, Louisa thought her mother would deny who she was, send her away, reject the reunion. But then, something unexpected happened. Julia's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly moved forward, enveloping Louisa in a desperate embrace. "My daughter, my girl," Julia whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "How did you find me?" "How—" "It's a long story," Louisa replied, feeling strangely distant, as if observing the scene from outside. "It has to do with Catherine Hoffman." Upon hearing the name, Julia pulled back slightly, her eyes now showing concern. "Catherine found you. Is she with you?" "She's in New York City, but she doesn't know I'm here," Louisa explained. "I think we need to talk, don't we?" Julia nodded, visibly shaken. "Yes, we do. Let's go to my office." The office was small but elegant, decorated with photographs of fashion shows and framed drawings. Julia closed the door and indicated an armchair for Louisa, sitting opposite her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, as if trying to absorb each other's reality. "Where to begin?" Julia murmured, more to herself than to Louisa. "There's so much to say. So many explanations. Why did you abandon us?" The question came out harsher than Louisa intended, but it was the question that had tormented her since she was old enough to understand what it meant to grow up without a mother. Julia lowered her eyes, guilt evident in every line of her face. "It was never my intention to abandon you, Louisa. The circumstances were complicated." What circumstances would justify abandoning a 5-year-old daughter and an elderly mother? The anger Louisa had suppressed for so long finally emerged. "None," Julia admitted, tears streaming down her face. "Nothing justifies what I did, but I want you to understand what happened." In the following minutes, Julia revealed a story that made Louisa question everything she thought she knew about her own life. "I met Catherine when I worked at the hotel," Julia began. "It was an instant connection. I had never felt anything like it for anyone. When she went back to Switzerland, I was devastated. We promised to keep in touch, but it was difficult back then. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. Not by Catherine, obviously, but from a brief relationship I had after she left. When I learned of the pregnancy, I was alone, scared. I wrote to Catherine, telling her about the situation, hoping... I don't know what I was hoping for." "And what happened?" Louisa asked, absorbing every word. "She came back. She flew straight to Miami when she received my letter. She said she loved me, that she wanted to help raise the baby with me. It was a dream. We planned everything. I would go with her to Switzerland after the birth. We would start a new life together. With you." Julia paused, her gaze lost in painful memories. But there were complications. Catherine was married. A marriage of convenience, she said, a family arrangement she maintained for financial and social reasons. Her husband, Hans, found out about us, about the pregnancy. He threatened to destroy her career, cut off all access to financial resources if she tried to take me to Switzerland. Even so, we decided to go ahead with the plan. You were born. And those were the happiest months of my life, with you and Catherine visiting whenever she could. But then, when you were almost a year old, things changed. "Changed how?" Louisa asked, trying to process so many revelations. "Hans showed up in Miami. He had information about my past, things I had done when I was younger and desperate, things that could get me into serious trouble." Julia took a deep breath. "He gave me an ultimatum: disappear from Catherine's life or face the consequences. And you chose to disappear," Louisa concluded, the hurt evident in her voice. "It wasn't that simple. Hans offered money, a lot of money, for me to start over somewhere else, far from Miami, far from Catherine. Money I could use to give you a better life." Julia wiped away tears. "I accepted, thinking it would be best for everyone. I left you with my mother, promising I would return to get you when I was settled. But you never came back." "No," Julia admitted. "I came to New York City, started working in fashion as I always dreamed. But things weren't easy. Hans's money ran out faster than I expected. When I finally achieved some stability, years had passed. I tried to reconnect with my mother, but found she had moved. I hired a detective, but he couldn't locate you both." Louisa felt a wave of indignation. "It wasn't hard for Catherine to find us, and for me it wasn't hard to find you." "I know there's no excuse," Julia said, her voice broken. "Over time, the shame and guilt became so great that I convinced myself that you would be better off without me, that my mother would take better care of you than I ever could." "Grandma had a stroke 2 years ago," Louisa informed her coldly. "I've been living practically on the street since then, selling bracelets to survive." The revelation hit Julia like a physical blow. She covered her mouth with her hand, horror etched on her face. "My God, Louisa, I didn't know. I imagined that we were fine, that we didn't need you." Louisa could no longer contain her anger. "Why are you in contact with Catherine now? What's your game?" Julia seemed surprised by the question. "How do you know I'm in contact with her? I saw messages on her phone. You're plotting something related to me. A deep sigh escaped Julia's lips. Catherine found me about 2 years ago. After Hans's death, she intensified her search for me and for you. When she found me, I told her everything, about Hans's ultimatum, about how I had lost contact with you and my mother. She was devastated, but determined to set things right. We decided she would try to find you first, establish a relationship, see how you were before I reappeared in your life. Julia wiped away new tears. We were afraid of how you would react after so long. We thought it would be less traumatic if Catherine approached first, offered help, prepared the ground. You manipulated me, Louisa accused, standing up. You played with me, as if I were a pawn in a chess game. That wasn't our intention, Julia protested, also standing up. We wanted to protect you, to make the transition as painless as possible. Less painful, Louisa laughed without humor. Do you have any idea what I've been through in the last few weeks? The sleepless nights trying to understand what Catherine really wanted? The lies, the half-truths, the suspicions. I know we made mistakes, Julia admitted, her voice small, but our intention was good. Catherine, she never stopped loving either of us. She spent years looking for a way to reunite us, to fix what Hans destroyed. Louisa suddenly felt exhausted. It was too much to process all at once. The reunion with her mother, the revelations about the past, the discovery that she had been part of an elaborate strategy by Catherine and Julia. I need air, she said, heading for the door. Then I need to think. Louisa, please, Julia pleaded, trying to hold her. Don't go. We've just reunited. And it's your fault for the time we lost, Louisa replied, pulling her arm away. I need space now. Outside the atelier, Matthew waited anxiously. Seeing Louisa's devastated expression, he quickly approached. What happened? Did you find her? Louisa nodded mechanically. Let's take a walk. I need to tell you everything, and I need to think about what to do now. As they walked through a nearby park, Louisa recounted all the revelations to Matthew. The boy listened attentively, offering a shoulder for Louisa when the tears finally came. Not tears of joy at the reunion, but of frustration, anger, and a deep sadness for lost time, for the lies told, for the choices others had made for her. What are you going to do now? Matthew asked when Louisa finally calmed down. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to go back to Miami, confront Catherine, demand that she confess everything. Another part wants to simply disappear, not see either of them again. And your grandmother, her treatment? It was an important consideration. Despite everything, her grandmother was receiving treatment that could significantly improve her quality of life, thanks to Catherine. I can't abandon her, Louisa acknowledged, and honestly I can't deny that Catherine has helped, even if her motivations weren't what she claimed. At that moment, the cell phone Catherine had given Louisa rang. It was Catherine herself, probably calling to check on Louisa. Hesitantly, she answered, Louisa, are you all right? Catherine's voice sounded worried. I called Mrs. Celia's house and she said she hadn't seen you today. I'm fine, Louisa replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Actually, Catherine, I'm in New York City. A stunned silence on the other end of the line. In New York City? What do you mean? What are you doing there? I found my mother, Louisa said simply. I just spoke with her. I know everything now. Another silence, longer this time. When Catherine spoke again, her voice was choked. Louisa, please, let me explain. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I know you had a plan, didn't you? A careful timeline to reveal the truth to me gradually, when you thought I was ready. It was to protect you, Catherine insisted, to not cause more trauma than you had already suffered. And who decided what was best for me? Louisa asked, the anger returning. You, my mother, who abandoned me. What right do you have to control my life like this? None, Catherine admitted after a pause. You're right, Louisa. We didn't have the right. But everything we did was out of love. An imperfect love, full of mistakes. But still, love. The sincerity in Catherine's voice touched something in Louisa. Behind all the manipulations and half-truths, there was a genuine desire to mend something that had been broken for a long time. Where are you? Catherine asked. I can come find you. We can talk, the three of us, clear the air once and for all. Louisa hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I understand, but know that I'm here when you are ready. And Louisa, Catherine's voice faltered for a moment. I'm so sorry for everything. After hanging up, Louisa remained silent for a long time, looking at the city's movement around her. New York City continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the personal drama unfolding amidst its vastness. What are you going to do? Matthew asked again. Louisa took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm envelop her. I'm going to do what should have been done a long time ago. I'm going to force a meeting between the three of us. No more secrets, no more manipulation. I want to hear the whole truth, face to face, and then decide what to do with my life from now on. With renewed determination, Louisa called her mother. I'm with a friend in the park near your atelier. I want you to call Catherine and come meet us. It's time for us to talk, the three of us, honestly, this time. 2 hours later, in a discreet cafe near the atelier, Louisa sat opposite Julia and Catherine. Matthew had withdrawn to give them privacy, promising to meet Louisa later at the bus terminal. The initial silence was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions, with years of absence and secrets. It was Louisa who broke it. I want to know everything. No filters, no softened versions to protect me. I'm strong enough to handle the truth, whatever it may be. Catherine and Julia exchanged glances, as if deciding where to begin. It was Catherine who took the initiative. When I met your mother in Miami, Louisa, it was like finding a part of me I didn't even know was missing. I had never felt anything so intense, so real. But my life in Switzerland was complicated. My marriage to Hans, though loveless, was tied to contracts, family obligations, my own career. Even so, when Julia wrote to me about the pregnancy, I didn't hesitate. I came back to Brazil. I promised we would raise the baby, you, together. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Only in the first few months after your birth, I traveled constantly between Zurich and Miami. They were short, hidden visits, but they were the happiest moments of my life. Julia continued the story, her voice trembling. When Hans found out, he came to Miami. He had hired investigators who discovered things from my past, involvement with dangerous people, debts, compromising situations. He threatened to use that information against me, threatened to take you away from me through the judicial system. And you believed him? You ran away because of threats? Louisa asked, incredulous. It wasn't just because of that, Julia admitted. He offered money, a lot of money, for me to disappear from Catherine's life. In my confused mind, I thought I could use that money to start over, to eventually give you a better life. It was a terrible, impulsive decision. Motivated by fear and ambition. What Hans didn't tell me, Julia continued, is that part of the agreement included that I could never contact Catherine again, could never reveal where I was, and could never come back to get you. I only discovered these clauses when it was already too late, when the money was running out and I had lost contact with my mother and with you. Why did you never look for us later? Why did you never return to Miami? Louisa's voice trembled with contained emotion. I tried a few years later. I hired a detective, but he couldn't locate you. The apartment where I left you was occupied by another family, and no one knew where you had moved. Julia lowered her eyes. Over time, the shame and fear became so great that I gave up. I convinced myself that you would be better off without me, that my mother would be a more stable presence in your life than I ever could be. And you? Louisa turned to Catherine. Why did you never look for me before? I did look, Catherine replied. When Julia disappeared, I was devastated. I spent months looking for you in Miami. I hired detectives, visited the old apartment, the hotel where she worked. But Hans had been meticulous. He used his contacts to create false trails, to confuse my searches. Eventually, I also gave up. I went back to my life in Switzerland, to my empty marriage, to my career. But I never forgot either of you. Catherine took a deep breath. When Hans passed away 3 years ago, I finally felt free to seek answers. I intensified my search and eventually found Julia here in New York City. And you decided to manipulate me, Louisa concluded, the hurt evident in her voice. It wasn't manipulation, Catherine protested. At least not the way you think. We were genuinely concerned about your reaction. We thought it would be less traumatic if I approached first, gained your trust, prepared the ground to eventually reunite the two of you. What do you expect now? Louisa asked, looking from one to the other. That I forgive everything and the three of us live happily ever after as a family. After everything I've been through. We expect nothing, Julia replied softly. We just want the chance to be part of your life, in whatever way you feel comfortable, whether that means just financial help from a distance, or occasional meetings, or whatever you need and want. The decision is yours, Louisa, Catherine added. It always was, though we were slow to realize it. Louisa looked at the two women in front of her. One, the mother she never truly knew. The other, the foreigner who had entered her life so suddenly. Both imperfect, both marked by questionable choices, but both seemingly sincere in their desire to mend the mistakes of the past. I need time, Louisa finally said. I can't decide this now. There's my grandmother to consider, my studies, my whole life in Miami. Of course, Catherine agreed. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, we can continue with what we've already started. Your grandmother's treatment, your lessons, your re-entry into school. No more lies, Louisa demanded. No more secrets or edited versions of the truth. If we're going to try any kind of relationship, it has to be based on total honesty from now on. Both agreed immediately. There was a long road ahead, full of difficult conversations, tentative reconnections, trust to be rebuilt. But for the first time since everything began, Louisa felt she had some control over the situation, over her own destiny. 3 months later, Louisa's life had changed drastically. Her grandmother, responding well to treatment at the specialized clinic, could already speak a few words and partially move her right arm. Louisa now lived in Catherine's apartment in Miami, attending a private school where she quickly distinguished herself as one of the best students in her class. Julia had temporarily moved to Miami, renting an apartment near Catherine's. She came almost daily to see Louisa, in meetings that, at first, were tense and uncomfortable, but gradually became more natural, more warm. In one of these encounters, as they walked along the beach at sunset, Julia finally asked the question that had been in her heart since their reunion. Do you think you can ever forgive me, Louisa? Louisa looked at the horizon, where the sun dipped into the sea in shades of orange and pink. I don't know if it's a matter of forgiveness. It's more accepting that the past cannot be changed and deciding if I want to build something new from here. And do you want to? A small smile appeared on Louisa's lips. I'm trying. One day at a time. It was enough for Julia, who smiled through her tears. As for Catherine, her relationship with Louisa had evolved into something that wasn't exactly maternal, but that had its own beauty and meaning. Catherine became a mentor, an older friend who offered guidance, stability, and opportunities Louisa would never have had otherwise. The trio formed an unconventional family, united not by blood or legal roles, but by conscious choices, by difficult forgiveness, by a shared determination to build something good from the ruins of the past. One special afternoon, the three gathered in Louisa's grandmother's room at the clinic. Mrs. Zuleika, though still limited by the stroke's aftermath, was lucid enough to understand what had happened. When she saw Julia for the first time after so many years, her eyes filled with tears, and with effort, she managed to utter a single word, "Daughter." The hug that followed, awkward due to Mrs. Zuleika's physical limitations, but laden with emotion, was a moment of healing for everyone present. Catherine, observing the scene with tear-filled eyes, felt that she had finally fulfilled the silent promise she had made to herself years earlier, to reunite that fragmented family, to mend what had been broken by fear, ambition, and manipulation. Sitting together in the clinic garden afterward, the four, Louisa, Julia, Catherine, and Mrs. Zuleika in her wheelchair, seemed finally at peace. "What happens now?" Louisa asked, looking from one to the other. "Whatever you want to happen," Catherine replied softly. "Your life, your choices." "I want to keep studying," Louisa decided. "I want to graduate, maybe go to college for arts or design, like both of you. "And where do you want to live?" Julia asked, hesitant. Louisa thought for a moment. "For now, here in Miami, it's my home. It's where Grandma is. But maybe, in the future, I can spend seasons in New York City, get to know your atelier better, or even visit Switzerland with Catherine someday." The future opened before her, not perfect, not without complications, but full of possibilities that once seemed unattainable. That night, back at the apartment, Louisa found a package on her bed. Inside, there was a photo album and a letter from Catherine. "Dearest Louisa, these are images I've kept all these years, photos of you as a baby, with your mother, with me. They are pieces of our story that have been hidden for too long. We cannot recover the lost years, but we can create new memories from now on. With all my affection, Catherine." Louisa carefully flipped through the album, absorbing each image, her mother young and smiling, holding a baby, Catherine looking at both with evident adoration, moments captured from a life that could have been, from a family that was just beginning before being brutally interrupted. But it was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter Louisa would write with her own words, her own choices, her own voice. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that this voice was strong enough to be heard.